Let's go back to this one.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is meeting of the regional RDAP meeting number 20. My name's Ian Birch. I'm the presiding member. I'll introduce the other panel members. To my immediate left is Mr. Tony Arias, Deputy Presiding Member, and a specialist member is Mr. Brian Curtis. We also have online Councillor Malcolm and Councillor Johnson. We have two items on the agenda, but we'll deal with this one first, and then I'll introduce the other panel members when we get to that item. We also have online from the Shire of Gingin, James Bayliss, and is Sam Smith there as well, James, or just you?
No, Sam is not present.
Okay. We also have present officers from the department who will be dealing with minutes and any governance issues if they arise. So with that, I will open the meeting and declare the meeting open and acknowledge the traditional owners and pay respects to elders past and present of the land on which the meeting is being held. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. The meeting will be recorded and live streamed in accordance with Regulation 40(2)(a). Next item on the agenda is apologies. I haven't received any. Do I have any late apologies? No. Members on leave of absence. No members on leave of absence. Noting of minutes. Previous minutes are available on the RDAP website. Next item is declarations of due consideration. I ask all panel members to confirm that they're familiar with the substance of reports and information provided for the item before us. Do you have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Everyone's making that acknowledgement. Disclosure of interest. We have standing declarations for the two elected members. Oh, okay. There is a standing declaration if you were at the council when this item was considered. That's it, indeed, if it was considered by the council.
So, I don't think this one came to council, did it, James?
No, it didn't.
No.
There's no need for that declaration. Any other declarations? Any panel members? No? Thank you. Which brings us to the item, which is item 3.1 for lot 908 2524 Gingin Brook Road near Gappy. Proposed animal husbandry intensive poultry farm additional grower shed. We have a request which I have accepted for a presentation from Ms. Ashley Maple from Road Group. She's also joined by David Marana and Brendan Bell as well. Okay, thank you. Are you going to take the floor, Ashley? Or you're welcome to all join. Okay. Standing orders say 3 minutes, so you can observe that. Otherwise, we'll consider whether we need to go further.
My name is Ashley Maple. I'll be speaking in support of the application for the expansion of the operational poultry farm through the construction of one additional growing shed. My colleague David Marana, Ashley, Brendan Bell, and I are available to answer any questions. We're supportive of the overall recommendation for approval. However, we're seeking to have conditions 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11 amended or removed. Conditions 6, 7, 8, and 9 duplicate the same requirement to upgrade the crossover to Telephone Road and involves the preparation of the deed of agreement. We have no objections to the upgrade of the crossover to the standard that the Shire requires, and our proponent intends to cover the costs associated with the upgrade. However, We disagree that a deed of agreement is required to enforce this, as it imposes additional costs and delays to the proponent and provides no additional security to the Shire. We're not seeking to delay the upgrade works to a later stage, which is also a common trigger for requiring a deed. And the condition specifically references the timing of the upgrade works being prior to the commencement of use. And the Shire isn't undertaking the upgrade works on behalf of the proponent, which is also another common trigger for requiring a deed. We therefore request conditions 6, 7, 8 and 9 be consolidated into one condition requiring the crossover to be upgraded to the Shire's satisfaction and prior to the commencement of use. The wording of an appropriate condition was included in our written deputation request. In terms of condition 11, this prohibits the composting of spent birds on site, and the proponent is proposing to compost birds on site, and therefore this should not be conditioned on the approval, but instead be covered by additional details provided with the environmental management plan. This includes responding to emergencies or unusual circumstances where the usual handling of spent birds can't occur. If you have any questions, David, Brendan and I are available to answer.
Thank you. Panel members, we will seek a response from the city, from the Shire's officers. Prior to that, any other questions you have?
Perhaps for the chair, clarification. Did you say 6, 7, and 8? Or?
Sorry, 6, 7, 8 and 9.
6, 7, 8. So in relation to condition 8, it refers to achieving appropriate visual sightlines. How would you suggest that's dealt with?
The condition references a standard drawing that the Shire has, and so our proposal is that we, through clearing that condition, liaise with the Shire to determine what sort of sightlines are required to upgrade.
Okay. So through the reference to satisfaction of the council.
Yes.
Okay. And just your request around condition 11, if the application doesn't propose composting on site, does that present a problem in terms of any potential approval?
A land use problem?
Yeah, you request a condition 11 be deleted, is that correct?
Yeah, because it's not something that we're proposing. Dealing with spent birds, waste and manure is a management requirement for poultry farms in general. And that we're proposing that that be dealt with through an environmental management plan that deals with how this waste is managed. We're not proposing that it occurs on site, we're proposing that it happens off site.
And the requirement for the environmental management plan is through condition 5, is that correct?
Yeah, we've provided an environmental management plan which where the condition requires it to be upgraded and updated to respond to something.
I think there might be, is there something in the advice about? I thought I read somewhere that you indicate that you won't be.
That was our suggestion, that an advice note could address some of those issues about those sorts of activities. Condition 4 also dealt with the implementation of the environment management plan, and then condition 5 talks about just maintaining records and reports about that.
So James, can we have your response to the request in relation to the conditions? And I note that there is an alternative wording for the new condition 6. If you're happy with the general intent, you'd be satisfied if that was to be replaced with the one proposed in the submission.
Through the chair, the Shire is opposed to any changes, and the reason being that I think all of the conditions serve a slightly different purpose. Although they're similar, they are different. The deed achieves more than simply requiring the road to be upgraded. So we typically find within a deed that there's a defect period. We ensure that the contractor, whoever does the work, hold the required public indemnity and whatever else because they're touching a Shire asset. I think it's fairly common practice for a proponent, before they touch a Shire asset, to enter a legal agreement that guides how that asset is upgraded. So condition 6 relates to telephone road upgrade, not the crossover upgrade. It seeks to ensure that that agreement is reached before there's a shovel in the ground, whereas condition 7 then provides sufficient time for site works and whatever else to commence, but before the sheds are used, that road upgrade has been completed. In relation to condition 8, again, I think that sits separate because currently there hasn't been any clarity around how sight lines can or will be achieved. So that's specifically been placed in there to ensure that prior to we entering the deed of agreement, that the applicant demonstrates that the sight lines are sufficient. And again, condition 9, therefore, similar but slightly different, relates precisely to the crossover. Our preference is to keep it separate. I'm not sure if that satisfies the panel, but that's the Shire's position.
There is I don't quite understand the Shire's position. There is sorry, I'm just want to get to it. Attachment 7, the crossover drawing. And I understand that, is that based on the Shire's template for crossovers? Have your engineers had a chance to look at that?
Correct, that's a standard specifications. The Shire doesn't employ any engineers. No.
Yeah, because if it's a condition of approval, I don't understand why you would need a deed as well. They would have to get approval for the standard of the crossover, and they'd have to. I think the suggestion is what prior to be. Sorry, now which screen? The proposed condition 6 says what prior to commencement of works. So the construction the crossover would be in before any other works started. So I don't quite understand how the city would require a deed on top of that. It wouldn't seem to be exposed. Am I missing something?
Sorry, no, condition 6 says that the agreement needs to be reached before site works, whereas condition 7 outlines that before the use is undertaken, that those works need to be completed.
But the alternative recommendation put forward, I'm sorry, I haven't got it's prior to commencement of use. Okay, so it's still, they can't begin operating until they put the crossover in. So is it my understanding that would be the normal way that things are done? It was mentioned that if the city was to do it, then there would be need for a deed. Sorry, yeah. I don't know if you can add any more than what you've said, but basically it would seem that the condition as proposed gives all the city all the certainty it would need.
Through the chair, I think we have a difference of opinion on that. This is pretty typical of how the Shire operates. If it provides the Shire with security that the workmanship is adequate and that there's a defect period, I'm unsure how that would apply based on the revised condition put forward.
Something new to me, but anyway, where is it? So you're proposing, and you mentioned condition 11.
Yeah, through the chair again, based on the Shire's experience, today, we are requesting that there's a very clear and explicit prohibition with respect to composting. And I understand through the applicant's documentation that that's not the intention, well, I don't see why that condition would be controversial.
So if that's the condition, would they not need to have that in their environmental management plan?
Sorry, I missed that member.
There's a condition in relation to environmental management plan, which my understanding would cover that, and does that mean it wouldn't have that condition? Condition 7, then you wouldn't need to be within the environmental management plan. Seems like they'll.
Arguably, it would then have the same effect, but again, just for clarity, if it's going to have the same effect, I don't see why it would be controversial to remain as is.
Panel members, any other questions? Either the presenters or the Shire?
Just providing member, in terms of the suggestion of condition 6, I can understand James' concern about defects. James, if the proposed amended condition included some reference to agreement to a defects period, wouldn't that then address the Shire's concern?
Look through the Shire, potentially. Again, what the Shire has recommended is pretty standard, and we've recommended on a number of DAPs. So I've never encountered resistance to this effect, but my preference would be just to leave it as a deed of agreement. Again, there's other aspects to the deed with respect to ensure contractors hold public liability and whatever else that I think goes beyond what a condition can capture. But again, I'll be guided by the panel as to how you see fit.
Yes, through the chair, to the applicants, you mentioned that I understand there's two aspects of these conditions that you're challenging. One is the cost of that. Can you say a bit more about what other implication it could have for the way you want to proceed, and if it's going to delay an aspect of it?
Yeah, so a deed is often secured on finding that's located, and that's not something that we want to be put on the table. That plus the delays and costs associated with getting the legal agreement drawn up to something that is essentially capable of being achieved through complying with the condition satisfaction of the Shire.
I think on the point of the addition, talking about data period or similar. So yeah, to clarify the obligations following instruction.
So how would that be dealt with? It's not by a deed.
It might, I mean, I would assume that the Shire has a normal arrangements when there's any works undertaken. May just be that there's a, in some occasions there's bonds held and that kind of agency to just ensure that the works remain appropriate and in order. So there may be some other things. The principle of a period of time whereby any repairs or defects can be rectified.
Okay. Thank you. Panel members, any other questions on not just this matter, but anything else? No?
No. No.
Well, we'll move to the item, which I've already mentioned is for a poultry farm additional grower shed, Gingin Road in Gabby. We have responsible for the recommendation to approve the application with a number of conditions. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the motion?
Ms. Howard moves that.
Yes,
Councillor Johnson.
Councillor Belton, thank you. Councillor Johnson, as the mover of the motion, you to speak.
speak.
I agree with Mr. Bayliss. I think that the Shire, it's sort of our standard format, and it ensures that we, if you like, we lock it in, and I'm happy with the motion, the recommendation as it is.
Thank you. Councillor Belton, seconder.
I agree with Councillor Johnson and Mr. Bayliss. We do use deeds, and they have tried to secure us some security in making sure the job's being done. So I agree with the recommendation.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Wish to speak to the motion? Brian or Tony?
Yes, I'm happy to support the motion in terms of the use, recognising it's a minor extension or relatively minor extension to the existing activity. In terms of the placement of the new building, I think it's been positioned to minimise any impact onto sensitive locations. So from that perspective, I'm comfortable. I'm also comfortable that the requirement of environmental management plan will address the normal environmental considerations that need to apply for this sort of activity. So on that basis, I'm prepared to support the motion.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, equally, I'm prepared to support the recommendation. With regard to the composting of birds, it does seem to me that that is a matter that might appropriately be dealt with through an environmental management plan. I also understand that from the administration's point of view, they'd like that to be clear. So I think on balance, I'm happy to just leave that as it is.
Thank you. Yes, it's been well put together and thoroughly assessed, and I can readily support the application. I am not convinced that there is the need for the deed. It just seems to be an unnecessary addition to the process and an expense. There's a condition of a planning approval that has to be in, and that is normally sufficient. And then it's up to the Shire to make sure that it's done the proper specifications. But and I'm not sure how a deed gives any more strength to that. But I, having said that, I'll accept the recommendation as put forward. Similarly, with the composting, there is sort of legal precedent about conditions that really not really. I mean, it's not proposed to compost birds on site. As mentioned, it is covered by other regulation, and I'm not sure about the sustainability of that condition. However, and there's been plenty of judgments that said that just because you're uncertain, you shouldn't put something in. But having said that, I won't propose an amendment, and I'll move back to move of the motion to close the debate. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, no, I'm happy. Yeah, to go forward. Yeah, as it is.
Here.
Approve the application. All those in favour? Thank you. We can't see your hand, but it looks like. Thank you, Councillor Felt. Your shoulder indicated that it was up, so I took it. Thank you. So that's carried unanimously. So thank you very much to the Shire of Gingin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we leave?
Good afternoon, Councillor McNaught and Councillor Nunn. Can you hear us and see us?
I can hear you. Good afternoon.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
And we just got the City of Karratha Officer Chris. Can you hear and see us?
Yes, we can hear and see you. Can you see us?
We just don't have audio, visual. You actually don't have your camera set up.
Yeah, we've been trying to work it out and we're trying to make it work at the moment.
You can hear us, that's the main thing. We'll just try and sort that out.
Right. Thank you. We can now move to the City of Karratha matter. And joining us on the panel, we have Councillor Kelly Nunn and Councillor Travis McNaught, who are both online. Welcome to you, councillors. Firstly, can I ask, I'll ask all the panel again, whether this is a declaration of due consideration, whether all panel members have duly considered all the matters and are familiar with the matters before them today. If you could have a show of hands, please. Thank you. Everyone's making that declaration. Next one is disclosure of interests. Councillors, has this matter been to council and were you in attendance at the council meeting?
No, it hasn't been presented to council.
It hasn't. Okay, so there's no need for a declaration there. Any other declarations of interest? No? No. Thank you. So we now have the item before us, which is lot 2654, number 275 Bellevue Road, Nickel, proposed hotel and restaurant. I have received deputations from a number of people in regard to in support of the proposal, which I have accepted. And I understand there is going to be, there are 5 of you. I understand there's going to be a joint presentation. Is that correct?
So just
Oh.
Yes, we did put together a combined presentation for ease of secretaries. If we could just present in that order, Jade, Neil, Madison, Owen and Melinda will be online. And then I have the rest of the questions.
Thank you. So we have Neil Madison from RDAP.
Yes.
Okay. Now we normally have 3 minutes per person, so we'll talk about 15 minutes. Hopefully we can keep it to that. There is a bit of
We've got some timing, so I'm very confident that we're speaking to 3 each. Is this the one I emailed earlier? Yes. Amazing. Yeah.
I'm Neil Gilmartin, I'm the director of the company.
Neil Gilmartin. Jade?
I'm Jade
Where's
Williams,
Steve?
I'm the shareholder. Yeah.
Belinda is going to be online, is she?
She is.
Are you there, Belinda?
She's
Yeah, yes, I am. Thank you, presiding member. My apologies. I was giving a peer workshop this morning for the Planning Institute, so I couldn't get into the city in time. My apologies.
Well, I suppose I'll accept that. And Owen, I saw Owen on screen as well.
G'day.
Okay, so Madison, you're going to. Oh, okay.
Just wait for this one. I could look there.
I haven't set the clock. One's the owner one. That's right.
No, that's an error in the council prepared before. So I'm the sole director of the company. That is the applicant, the person who Shire, and the board is the sole shareholder. For the company owner, she's the sole shareholder. I'm the sole director.
Owner of the site.
We're the owner of the owner of the freehold, maybe in a different entity, but the same arrangement.
Walkabout Holdings and Cures.
No, we own another site in Port Hedland, same scale, same. So that's why it's relevant as an example.
Ready to go.
Okay, over to you, Jade.
Good afternoon, panel members. My name is Jade Robbins, and as mentioned, I'm the sole shareholder of QSD Shire and also Bayview Hotel Karratha, which is our attendance trading company. We're seeking to invest substantially in growth of a successful, innovative business model, which was developed after my father moved to Port Hedland 15 years ago. A large format hotel with multiple hospitality offerings. It is unique, and we are extremely proud of that, as evidenced by the many awards won, community support, and recognition that we've received. We wouldn't be seeking to replicate this model in Karratha if we weren't aware of the community support for a hotel. This support is self-evident in the public submissions, social media feedback, additional written submissions to the DAP, and to the city's own endeavours to build a hotel, which stretched back close to 15 years and has consistently failed. Quickly flip through some of these, hopefully you've had a chance to look at some of those comments.
I should mention that we have had your presentation, so we've all had the option to see them, but please you present how you wish.
Thank you. They distract us a little bit. This even included putting the city's own money, a sum of $10 million. And at the time, the WA Tourism Council said this: a significant conflict of interest for the city of Karratha to act as both an investor in a competitive market and as the planning and regulatory authority. Despite this intervention, no new health hotel has been built. As a retired former regional Queensland councillor, what concerns me is the lack of content, the content or lack thereof in evaluating the proposal objectively against the planning framework. It does not refer to information in the detailed planning application, nor give any weight to the positive community feedback that has been received. Much is put to the size and scale of the facility. These are market factors. They're simply not relevant. I had this drilled into me when I was a decision maker. Similarly, the design and layout are subjective. The report goes to efforts to suggest what a good hotel design is, and that ours is not. We run a hotel, as mentioned, with a similar design, and there are many others just like this, all of which are well patronised. Here are some pictures of the hotel rooms that we're actually constructing right now that I took last week. I don't see any policy anywhere that says how a hotel must be arranged. If there was, we would have complied with it. I go back to what I learned as a councillor making decisions on development applications. Two things. One, assess a project on its merits against the planning rules. And two, consider community feedback. Our proposal complies with the planning framework or has adequate justification for certain variations. Proper conditions can be applied to address matters as with any other proposed development. And also the community strongly supports it. On this basis, I'd seek the DAP members move a motion for approval with supporting conditions prepared by our planners, which will finally enable the city to secure the new hotel that it has been needed for. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll leave questions until the end. That's all right. So now we have Neil.
Okay, good afternoon, presiding member, deputy presiding member, specialist member, and councillors. I'm here to ask for approval to build a hotel and a restaurant. I want to provide something to the Karratha community that they've been seeking an investment in for many years. From submissions and written deputations to the panel, the Karratha community and their elected state representatives in particular have made clear their overwhelming support for what I am proposing. For 13 years or more, I have lived at and operated the Landing and Walkabout Hotel in Port Hedland. There are almost 920 rooms in that facility, a function space, 2 public restaurants, and the hotel licence sits over it. We have always advertised and provided our full range of services to the community. I'm focused on building hotel rooms and amenities which cater for all aspects and all comers in our society. In the time that I have operated the Landing and Walkabout, some examples of clients I've regularly provided accommodation to include women fleeing domestic violence, sporting clubs, up to 120 at a time with netballers, coming to our town for conventions and meets, people visiting family and friends, tourists travelling through seeking a few nights out of their caravan, government agencies including the police, DFS, cyclone response teams, WA Health, even the local authority when they recruit new staff, send to our hotel room. I could go on, but yes, I definitely also cater for people who have a job and are working up there. That's the market. I'm not trying to build a cable beach resort because it doesn't suit my clientele or the people that are likely to resort to where I am. They spend their time either in the rooms, sleeping and relaxing, eating at our restaurant, or off the premises in their spare time, undertaking local businesses, activities, meeting people or working. I've designed the proposed facility on this basis. My guests do not want breakout areas. They want a quiet area to sleep. They don't want 6 people sitting outside of their room having a beer. That has to be in a different area. As the number of hotel rooms that I propose reflect the enormous amount of travellers visiting the community every day and the lack of investment in hotels in Karratha for such a long time. More than 30 years, if I'm not correct, it's been since the new hotel opened there, and the growth's been incredible in that city. My team has professionally and diligently explained how we propose to operate the facility, having properly responded to planning and policy framework that apply to the proposal and the site. They've prepared conditions which have been very well considered over a long period of time to be rational, reasonable, and consistent with previous DAP approvals for hotels in these circumstances. I met with the city several times prior to making this application and consulted with them. Based on the feedback of the executive, including the planning executive, I was confident to pursue the development as a hotel and invested a substantial amount of time, energy and money in preparing an application in conjunction with my professionals. The officer's reports appear to deflect or omit all the information we put forward to help them make an objective decision based on the town planning rules which are in place. I understand that that exists to ensure decisions are made based on objective planning merits of a proposal. I am grateful to be sitting here today, and I trust the members can reflect on the merits of this proposal and make a decision which enables me to get on with the business of delivering some more accommodation into Karratha and some new hospitality offerings for the Karratha community. Thank you very much for your time and professional consideration today.
Thank you. Do we now go to Belinda? No, Madison.
Thank you again. I'm Madison from RFF, an applicant for the proposal. There are obviously several points in the RAR that we strongly disagree with. The balance of our presentations will discuss these in addition to the technical matter experts who have provided written submissions. I trust you've read them all. I would like to first reiterate that the proposal is generally consistent with the adopted planning framework. We believe that the matters raised in the RAR are minor in nature and resolvable with standard conditions. In the interest of time, I will speak broadly only to the reasons outlined for refusal, but in those I will defer matters of technical matters of traffic, bushfire noise, and stormwater to the written submissions received. I know that we have all of our technical experts in the room or online if questions are required. With respect to built form, I need to re-emphasise the point that this is a single-storey development with very limited visibility from the street. The development's intent, as Neil and Jay have outlined, is to provide high-quality, affordable accommodation to the public. And we have taken some efficiencies, but the layout is still harmonious with other hotel layouts. It seeks to separate areas of rest with areas of recreation and hospitality, and therefore maximise its amenity for intended users. I'm of the view personally that the RAR uses the terms transportable and low quality interchangeably, but having reviewed the TLC Modulars portfolio, the plans they've provided, and the photographs that Jay has provided earlier, I don't agree that this is the case. I do agree that landscaping can and should form a large part of design of built form, and this is the case for the proposal. While we do agree that further detail needs to be provided to demonstrate a good quality landscape outcome, we are confident that spatially on this plan, the identified landscape area is right and will soften the perceived bulk and scale of our proposal. The proponent is willing and committed to work with the city to provide a high quality landscape solution, and we've suggested a condition to this effect. In our written submission, we prepared a suite of appropriate conditions drafted in accordance with recent regional DAP decisions. We have reviewed these against the city's R13 recommended conditions and confirm our suggested conditions capture the intent of the cities. This is with exception to those related to condition 3. There is a reference to a redesign of the site, which has some subjective language, we would say. Conditions regarding staging plan and no variation to any staging plan, and the operation and capacity of the business.
Sorry, can you give those condition numbers? You said condition 3.
Condition 3. I'm sorry, I didn't write down the letter reference, but it was a reference to the redesign of the site and included some here.
There are a number requirements. Well, perhaps we'll leave that.
Can I take on this?
Okay, if we need to come to it, then we can.
Yes, so we do have some marginal differences in the city's R13 conditions in relation to redesign of the site, staging, and then the conditions regarding operation times and capacity. We do not agree that these should be included as conditions and seek the panel to move a motion to adopt our standard conditions as included in our written deputation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So next, Belinda.
Next we have Belinda. She has no slides.
Thank you, presiding member and members of the panel. Can I just first confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can, Belinda.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This afternoon, I'll be speaking very briefly regarding the appropriate land use characterisation of the site. Now, it is accepted, as has been advised by the respondent in their RAR, by the city in their RAR, that it's open for a decision maker to determine the correct land use characterisation of the site. That issue is not in dispute. The applicant is of the view, however, that the land use applied for, in this case hotel, is the correct land use characterisation for what is sought in this application. What is clear is that what is proposed is a land use which proposes short-term accommodation available to any person seeking that accommodation. There is no intention of limiting the accommodation to a particular class of people. And relevant, we say to that, is that the City of Karratha's planning scheme provides a wide array of short-term rental accommodation, or as they're known in the industry, STRA accommodation use classifications. And if one goes through the zoning table and the land use definitions in the appendix, those include caravan park, hotel, motel, short stay accommodation, tourist development, tourist resorts, and workforce accommodation. What is relevant in this case is that all of those land use classifications are capable of approval in this tourism zone, which is where the land is located. So it's not a question here about whether or not the land, we're trying to shoehorn a land use into a particular land use classification in order to be able to obtain approval. Each one of them is capable of approval, and we say the most appropriate one is hotel. Secondly, while some of those short-term rental accommodation land uses impose a requirement as to the types of people who may stay, others do not. So, for example, it's appropriate in determining a land use definition to take into account the use, to take into account the defined term to give meaning to that definition. So, for example, in the definitions of tourist development and tourist resort, it is acceptable to assume that those land uses are confined for the use by tourists. Mind you, that definition, there is no definition of tourist in the scheme either. In relation to workforce accommodation, the people who are able to stay are limited by where they work, whether they work within the construction, resource, agricultural or other industries. However, land uses such as hotel and motel provide no such restriction on the types of patrons who may be accommodated. And that means it's possible for anyone to hire one or more hotel rooms to suit their purpose. That might be tourists, it might be workers who are anthropologists and historians in the Pilbara for Aboriginal heritage surveys. It might be a group of IT specialists in town to install a new computer system at a mining company. Or similarly, it could be a sporting team assembling for an event occurring in Karratha. And this is the intention of the applicant, to operate the facility in that way, in the same way that that the applicant operates similar hotels in other places throughout the Pilbara. Now, that's not to say that some of the rooms will not be used by workers who are in the industries listed in the workforce land use definition. But the fact that some people might be within those industries does not make it a workforce accommodation land use. And that brings me to my next point, and that is the level of control that is imputed within these definitions of the patrons who are living within these short-term rental accommodation land uses. It's clear from the definitions that there is a level of control over patrons in relation to workforce accommodation, which are not included in the other short-term rental accommodation definitions. And these controls are included in sub-lim B of that definition and suggest that, for example, all catering will be provided on site as well as recreational facilities. And these will only be available to people living at the accommodation and authorised visitors. And I place emphasis on that concept of an authorised visitor. That requirement for authorisation suggests a level of control not found in relation to hotel, for example. There is no requirement to obtain authorisation for a person to meet you at dinner at the hotel restaurant, or for them to meet you in your hotel room for that matter. This application does not propose a gated community in the sense of a workforce accommodation land use. It is available to anyone to attend and also for people outside of patrons to use the restaurant component. We would also say that workforce accommodation is a project-specific type land use. In practice, and as is recognised by the city's local planning policies, workforce accommodation tends to be project-specific, constructed for a particular progress and then decommissioned once that project finishes. And that's why time-limited approvals are usually issued for workforce accommodation in the Shire, in the city, to ensure that these land uses don't morph into more general forms of short-term rental accommodation over time. But this is not one of those accommodation sites. It's intended that this be available for any person or any organisation requiring short-term rental accommodation over time. Finally, we say it's important for the DAP to take a purposive approach to these land use definitions and not rely upon literal interpretations. A worker engaged in construction or resource industries, for example, could include, as I've noted, some workers in town to roll out an IT system or undertake heritage surveys for resource or agricultural industries. Further, the inclusion of that catch-all in the definition of workforce accommodation of all other industries, which taken to its ultimate conclusion would include most business travellers visiting Karratha. If a census of visitors to hotels in the Pilbara were to be undertaken, it would be clear that most people who are being accommodated are there to service the industries listed in the workforce accommodation definition. It could never have been the intention of the drafters of this scheme to limit these workers to workforce accommodation only, rather than using a hotel or other form of short-term rental accommodation. And for those reasons, we say that the appropriate land use definition is hotel. Two final points I wanted to make in respect to the RAR that has been published. The first is there is reference on page 8 of the RAR, or page 130 of the pack, which sets out what the city says are the appropriate land use definitions to apply and consider. In that regard, they make reference to a definition of hotel in the regulations. Now, that definition is not in the regulations, it's in the model provisions in Schedule 1 of the regulations, and it has absolutely no application in this case because it hasn't been adopted by the city in LPS 8. And therefore, the commentary that is included, which follows that, is just legally incorrect. Finally, you have been taken to some of the conditions of approval that were provided by way of the Regulation 13 request. I don't intend to reiterate any of that, except to say that Condition 3E, as imposed or proposed to be imposed by the city, is legally invalid. It requires the provision of an amended plan for the provision of improved amenity for guests within the layout of the accommodation buildings, including provision for communal open space areas, landscaping, shade structures, and other features. Now, when one looks at the design of the development, inserting those things would be a significant amendment to what is proposed to be approved, and we say goes too far. It's not a condition, it's boxing the approval around in ways that makes the approval uncertain and lacking finality. Thank you very much, members of the panel. I have nothing further, but am available for any questions should there be any. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. We now have, and there may be questions, but we'll move to the final presenter, I believe, Owen Hightower.
G'day everyone, good afternoon, DAP members. Look, apologies I'm not there in person. It's my birthday today and I promised the kids they wouldn't miss out on ice cream cakes, so I've chose to stick home in Karratha. I'm the Managing Director of RFF, planner with 20 years experience. I founded the company in the Pilbara, and we continue to work primarily in the Pilbara and Kimberley regions. And as I said, I live in Karratha now. Attracting private investment to develop new accommodation supply of all forms is one of the greatest challenges of Northwest communities. I'm genuinely enamoured of Neil and his family's effort to deliver new quality accommodation in an incredibly tough market, and to do so in a way that delivers real community benefit. It is thanks to innovative, out-of-the-box thinking and a deep understanding of how the Pilbara market functions. After QSD bought the site, we assisted with pre-lodgement meetings, worked to finalise a design and prepare supporting technical documentation. Agreement was reached with the city that the proposal could be treated as a hotel and that suitable information should be provided to support this in terms of the nature of operations. The application documentation submitted was comprehensive, addressing all aspects of the city's adopted planning framework and other relevant planning considerations. It included an operational overview and an operational plan clearly articulating why this is a proposed hotel, informed by the existing hotel operations of QSD hire, which are intended to be replicated here. The RAR report does not talk to this at all. Look, I've been around this topic for 15 years now, since I moved to the Pilbara, around workforce accommodation. I've written local government policies about it. I've advocated against them on behalf of community groups, and I've worked for proponents to obtain approval for workforce accommodation. What's clear to me is this is not workforce accommodation. If it was, I would have told QSD to apply for workforce accommodation because it's a use that can be approved in the tourism zone. The factors are clear and distinct, which Belinda went to. Anyone will be able to seek accommodation at the facility. There is a significant variability in room size, which is quite distinct from workforce accommodation. The size and the arrangement encourages guests to go to points of sale to help generate further revenue for the business, which is logical. Access to the site won't be controlled through a boom gate or a security guard, which is a common feature of workforce accommodation. Food and alcohol will be served without limitation beyond conventional liquor licence laws, and guests of the public, as I would say, would be able to party on, noise regulations permitted. And I'll admit that at the Walkie and the Landy in Port Hedland, I've done this myself a few times over the years. Guests will also be able to come freely and go from the property at any time, which again is different to workforce accommodation, where people are not able to come and go generally beyond what their employer permits them to do outside of work. The size and quality and the form of the rooms are buildings materially different to a Fleetwood or Osco Donga module. The photos, to me, speak quite clearly for themselves. To round this out, I would just like to emphasise we prepared and sought approval for a hotel based on the intended nature of the operations and the service offering. The community has offered its support for the development as presented. The development is consistent with the adopted planning framework for a tourism zone property in the city of Karratha. And in our view, there's no need to defer this decision. We feel there's adequate information to make a decision for approval today. And we have put forward what we feel is the right alternative recommendation for approval with reasonable conditions informed by previous DAP decisions. And on this basis, we would respectfully seek the RDAP grant approval for that proposed development today, based on our alternative resolution we have put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, panel members, we've heard 5 presentations. Any questions from any of the presenters? Firstly, I'll look to the city's elected members who aren't on screen at the moment. There we are. Councillor McNaught or Councillor Kelly, do you have any questions you'd like to ask any of the presenters? We will have the opportunity for the city's officers to respond to questions as well, but we'll start with those who have presented already.
No questions from me at this point in time. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Nunn, no questions?
No questions, thanks.
Through the chair, there's a lot of matters here to try and unravel, as you can imagine. The first question I have is that, leaving aside the use argument, I'm curious about the presentation of the development to the street frontage. There clearly is a difference of opinion as to what standard of presentation is being sought from the city. I'm curious because for you as an owner, I would imagine that you would also have a mutual desire for this to present very well to the street. So my first question is, can you tell us more about your approach to that and why we're in a situation where there's a lot of dispute about whether or not it presents well to the street?
So in my view, when we first approached the executive, which is the CEO and director of planning, they said we initially intended an all single-story development with appropriate screening landscaping, remembering our neighbours on 3 sides, the bush, the bush, the bush, and the back end of the houses. So there's no front end, it's all the backyard of the row of houses. But still, I wanted a single story for my own residence. They said, oh, we'd love to see something that can see the ocean. So at the back, I've dropped it up to 2 stories in an attempt to help their things, right? Which is even the name cafe. Then, despite putting in all those great landscaping plan, they continue to express concerns about this built form, built form, built form. They were actually more focused on the internal aspects than that which you can see in the public domain. Because at the moment, it's not a heavily trafficked road, it's on the fringe of residential. The issue of built form is only to a very low number of passing cars. It's not what you see in an aerial view, like you see there. If you're sitting in a car, riding a bike or walking, even a piece of 3 metre high shrubbery will completely block out the built form. You will not see it. If you talk about, and there's one proposed in Port Hedland, for example, at the moment, it's 6 stories high. So this built form stands out from everywhere around the whole town, and they've just painted rainbow colours across the thing. But that built form is maybe a 9 out of 10 consideration in terms of weighting. But our proposed development is single story. It's set back from the road by
30 metres.
30 metres or so. And we intend to screen largely the whole thing. So it's a continual theme, and there are a range of continual themes that have come out of the planning department in terms of efforts to query or question our initial approach that we agreed upon, to the extent where almost every professional discipline, traffic, parking, fire, etc., after getting one set of reports done by a professional organisation, they continue to go, no. So that's why you'll see this, 2 traffic consultants, 2 bushfire engineers, 2 of everything. And even in the special conditions they proposed, they want a 3rd set, right? I'm happy with the professionalism of the consultants that hired and the report, and they each agree with each other. Normally they can't even do that. They each agree, yes, this approach is correct, yes, this maths is correct, yes, this interpretation is correct. So the short answer to your question, I'm puzzled and I actually don't understand, and I don't believe there's any legitimacy in this constant overemphasis of built form. I do acknowledge that it's got to look great in terms of landscaping. We've got to have an entrance statement. We want it to, it's in our own interest, and we will do a good job of that. And we're happy to liaise with them on that. But they actually even go to the extent of wanting us to redesign the whole built form. Based on, yes, sorry.
I was just going to add in, perhaps the architectural plans originally submitted didn't reflect the evolving quality that we're now seeing in pictures from the factory and updated perspectives.
It would be really useful, as you described this, to actually see the elevation, street elevation.
Yeah, absolutely.
If,
we don't
have, I don't think.
It's not one of the slides we registered.
No.
I can pull it up for you.
Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons I suggested.
So let's go to the proposed one or the existing?
What?
The existing we can drop it on your word. Proposed we can find.
Proposed.
Yeah, happy to see that.
It wasn't in the attached plans that we received.
Oh,
So
really?
we've got some
In the
perspectives
application?
I follow this up, that's the one.
Yeah,
yeah, thanks, Ollie.
Sorry, just.
Yeah, sorry, and the plan should be in the application pack. That, I mean, the city wouldn't have accepted the application without that information, I would have thought. To go to the earlier point, this is a facility that needs to attract people to it. And again, my experience in the Pilbara, and it's wildly evident throughout many projects in the Pilbara, is landscaping is the predominant feature and predominant thing that people will see from the street. And if you ask the council officers, they will agree with that. Landscaping is the predominant feature because we have a low profile built form in the Pilbara because it's expensive to go up, right? It's just too expensive. And that's why we end up with arrangements where we have predominantly single story developments that offer a very low profile from the public realm. The best way to make something look nice when it's single story is to landscape it. And we're more than happy to work with the city to finalise fencing and landscaping solutions that make things look good from the street. And odds are you probably won't see the buildings from the street as a result of that.
Yes, certainly. I just think this is a matter that would be good to resolve. I hear what you say, and I understand the context and that landscaping may well be your approach to how you'd like it to present. But as a panel, obviously we're concerned not to just cover things with landscaping, is that the standard and quality and presentation of the built form is to an appropriate standard. So in that context, you refer to proposed condition 3 in alternative recommendation, seeking more detail. I just wanted to check, I mean, are you amenable to conditions that require you to provide elevations, to specify appropriate materials, to demonstrate how you deal with air conditioning, drainage? Well, there's a number of matters that are wrapped up in that.
Absolutely.
And I'm just curious whether you're just bumping heads.
No.
And saying,
amenable to a practical.
it sounds like you're saying it doesn't really matter because it's going to be landscape.
Yeah, that's not
that's what it sounds like.
Yeah,
so I'm trying to clarify.
Okay. All I'm saying in the overall way, yes, I get that. But
Great landscape.
That's not entirely what they're asking for. They're actually asking for us to redesign, renovate, change the existing buildings.
Okay, but I'm looking at actual conditions.
Yeah.
There's a list of matters.
Yes. I think it's
so am I right in thinking that you are amenable to some condition which might capture the need for more information
Yes.
Plans to demonstrate how the frontage of this development will look.
Yes.
Regardless of whether you have to move in and then you see the buildings, they're still presenting to a public.
That's fine.
In our suite of slides, we've actually, so we're so keen on to do this development, we've already paid for one of each of the 4 prototype rooms to be constructed in a factory, and there are photos of that. So you can see an actual photo with its colour scheme within our slide presentation. Madison might go on, and even the internal of the rooms. That's where my daughter and I were last week.
Brian's getting out to the overall picture.
Yeah.
Not just.
The overall. Yeah, absolutely.
If I can just continue down this line. So that's the front elevation. With regard to the conditions, so this is maybe more for the planners. I've sought to try and compare the proponent's proposed alternative and the city's proposed alternative for approval. And there are a number of gaps between you as to what matters might be covered in that. So we've spoken about the plans. I've heard that your legal representative considers the Plan B as being appropriate or not legally supportable. I understand that.
Condition 3.
No, this is it's condition 3, subparagraph E. As mentioned, that's but other than that, there are requirement for certain additional plans. I've gone through, and it looks to me like drainage swales. You're saying you'd be happy to provide detailed design of surface stormwater and drainage. I'm trying to establish whether there's a degree to which there's the city's condition 4 is seeking a revised TIA, and your proposal doesn't mention that.
We don't think it's required. I have Scott to talk to that more if you'd like. From meeting 2.
Can we do that? We'll do that now. Stop on that.
This is first condition 4, and then that's 3 more time.
Yeah, in the so that's the condition saying an updated TIA. In the advice note, there were 3 points that referred to detailed split path analysis for the car park and also deliveries. You would have noted in my deputation, we undertook a split path showing the existing delivery situation within the existing caravan site, and that will remain with the proposed development as well. So that's not going to change. So it's working now, it will work in the future. All of the car parking within the general light vehicle car park, it's all designed to Australian standards. Even the aisle widths are greater than required. So, we're more than happy to provide split paths showing that works. But as it's designed to standards, designed to a level that actually exceeds the standards, there should be no particular issue. And I don't believe the city has actually raised any particular concerns with regard to that car park to justify the need to actually do that work. Within the TIA report and within my deputation, there's justification with regards to the parking numbers. Certainly one of the main concerns I have with the RAR is they have a parking calculation for the hotel, a parking calculation for the restaurant, a parking calculation for the bar / tavern, but with no consideration over the reciprocal use or the use of the hotel
patrons then using the restaurant and the bar, and obviously not requiring parking in that manner. When you then refer to the alternative suite of conditions that the city provided with their suggested caps on the restaurant and the bar, if those caps were implemented, that actually means that the caps are lower in terms of what would generate as a parking need, and what the city is saying in the RAR is actually needed for those developments. So in my deputation, with an assumption of about a 75% shared usage between the hotel and the restaurant and the bar, the parking requirements for both the bar, or I'll call it the tavern and the restaurant, is actually lower than the visitor parking that's being provided sort of in front of the development adjacent to those two sites, as far as the proposal is concerned. Certainly, in my view, I think within the TIA and the deputation, we've shown clear justification as to how the parking should be more than sufficient to suit the development. But again, that's one of the things that the city was asking for within the TIA. The third issue was review and revision relating to traffic generated by this proposal. There's been no suggestion in the RAR that traffic generated claimed within the TIA is incorrect or too low or too high or whatever. There was no mention of it whatsoever. But they seem to be concerned that it may require some modifications or work within the road reserve, which is certainly not proposed or suggested within the TIA. Within our traffic report, we did a SIDRA analysis of the access. Now, when you refer to Australian standards 2890.1, which is the standard for off-street parking, the car park for this development is a Class 3, Class 4 car park, which means that the driveway needs to be constructed as an intersection that is capable of accommodating all traffic generated to a reasonable level. Or actually, I've actually read it now. It actually says, just bear with me for a second, adequately, so that the intersection treatment adequately caters for all projected traffic flows. Now, the SIDRA analysis we did basically showed all movements operating at a level of service A or B. The only level of service that operated at level C was the right turnout from the site, but even the level of service C is still above the minimum requirements of the WAPC transport assessment guidelines as far as the performance of the development. So the SIDRA analysis using the traffic generated calculations shows that the intersection of the driveway will operate at a satisfactory level. That's already shown within the TIA. There doesn't seem to be any need for any further analysis as far as that's concerned, in my opinion.
Will be mainly traffic coming in.
Yeah, well, the traffic coming in the morning.
Potential for queuing.
Traffic going out in the morning.
Is that what they're talking about? Potential for queuing out onto the street. It's a 30-metre setback, so there's
a lot of room for queuing within the site. Additionally, they mentioned concerns within the advice note about the access being potentially a major conflict point, considering it's located around a bend and has an existing posted speed of 70 kilometres an hour. The existing access points on the outside of the bend, so any vehicles coming out of the driveway would have very good sight lines through the bend. I have reviewed the crash data at that location, given that the site has been operating as a caravan park for a number of years. At the driveway location, 100 metres in either direction, there hasn't been a single crash reported in 15 years. And it would be important to note that while the caravan park would have operated at a lower overall traffic generation, the vehicles going in and out would have typically been slower moving with caravans, longer, slower moving, and therefore would have presented a higher risk than a normal light vehicle.
and yet has resulted in 0 crashes in 15 years, which is as far back as the data allows me to check.
So can I just,
So in summary, you don't, I don't know what else, what else there is to do. So you don't see there's a need for a condition in relation to.
Correct. I don't think there was anything specifically raised in the RAR that identified areas of deficiency or concern in the TIA, other than what has been listed as an advice note in the alternative list of conditions.
And
so those 2 access points, are they new access points?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Addison, the access point on the right-hand side is not included in this.
Correct.
In this particular DA. So we did no assessment on that one, and so we can't talk to that. I think that's potentially a future proposal. The access that we did analyse is essentially the existing access. It's exactly the same location.
So we're still on traffic?
I'm built with traffic.
Thank you, Scott. Well, are you still on?
Oh, you're still on traffic.
Yes, please. If the view is that this is a hotel, there are scheme requirements associated, and we discussed car parking. In the RAR, the figure proposed by is much higher, as you indicated. Even putting aside that there is a significant duplication associated with the bar and the restaurant, and putting those aside and saying not necessarily 100% internalised, the car parking requirement under the scheme, and this is a question for the council officers as well, based on the RAR, is 999. Is there a dispute that that's actually the scheme requirement?
No, not at all. It's a very similar scheme requirement that you would find if this hotel was in Margaret River, for example.
So it's a standard requirement.
So it's a standard requirement.
Yeah. So in terms of there is discretion thought in terms of that particular requirement. Who's the best person in the team to talk about why you consider that discretion should be applied?
I thought you were talking to them.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought maybe are there planning considerations rather than simply
there's some
traffic?
operational considerations.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like whoever in the team's.
I mean, I can certainly put my opinion forward. I certainly spend a lot of time up in the Pilbara area with work, doing road safety audits or development application site visits or line marking signage assessments for main roads, etc. And myself and my team, we might have 2-3 people go up, and we will spend a week up there doing various work for main roads or local authorities, etc. Just as an anecdotal example, we will stay in hotels like this in Karratha, Port Hedland, Tom Price, Newman, the like. We will have 3 separate rooms, but we will have 1 car. So obviously that's just an example, but people that will come up to Perth to work and are visiting remote areas will generally have 1 mine spec hire car or 4-wheel drive similar, but they'll each have an individual room. Similarly, other people that might be staying in a facility like this for a period because they're working on a shutdown or an upgrade or something at a nearby facility, they won't necessarily each have a hire car each. They'll utilise things like minibuses where they'll sleep, work, get up, travel to work, backwards, etc. So that's been accommodated within the development in terms of the provision of a number of bays capable of parking sort of minibus type sets up.
If I could just get, sorry, I was just going to, on that, just give a little anecdote. Community Cabinet happened in Karratha this week, and I had the privilege of bumping into Premier Cook while he was having a burger and a beer at the Northwest Brewing Co. And him and his advisors all crammed 5 people into a single Land Cruiser.
Sorry, is it? Because you're not on screen.
Sorry, yeah, there's a sharing going on. Not sure why.
We can probably take that.
Do you want it taken down?
Yeah, we'll take the plan down, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, DAP members. I was just saying, community cabinet occurred this weekend, and yeah, like I said, I bumped into Premier Cook. He was having a burger at Northwest Brewing Co. And him and his 4 other advisors all crammed into a single car. The nature again of the Pilbara market for visitors of all forms, whether they're tourists typically travelling in large groups because it's long distances and people like to share vehicles. As Neil went to, government employees, other people. The goal is to share your cars as much as possible to minimise the cost of travel. That's just the nature of being in a very remote situation where distance between places you're travelling is significant. And I think, to me, it goes to the point, if Premier Cook is, making sure he's sharing a car with 4 other people, that's 5 people, 1 car, 5 rooms. That's for me is the ultimate anecdote that the nature of the Pilbara market is different to what a model scheme determination about the number of rooms might be required is.
And I mentioned Market River before.
Yeah. And
if this hotel was in Market River, I would have potentially had a different recommendation in my traffic report with regards to that.
it's interesting you raised Market River because this panel's dealt with the Market River Hotel, and the issue of car parking always comes up, and the basis for applying discretion, and there is a capacity to apply discretion. And I appreciate the anecdotes about car usage, but the reduction that's being requested is significant. It's not 10%, it's not 30%, it's much, much greater.
We're north of 600 car parks, so
yeah, but it's, the RAR suggests 1,200, and even if you apply, say, 50% common usage for the restaurant and bar, it's still. Yeah.
So
perhaps
sorry, we've just got to be careful. We're not debating the item, but we just.
I'd like to answer that question from an operational perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we mentioned earlier that we have a similar design scale and operational mode hotel whatever. So there we have 920 rooms. We have by far the busiest hotel in the northwest in the top 10 in the state in terms of draft sales. And we also have 2 licensed restaurants. There we have a total of less car parks than that. We have 500 or 600. Whilst the hotel car park is often full, the 920 beds car park is never more than 70%, and there we have 400 car parks. Okay? What really does tend to happen? So in comparison to Pilbara, the city's recently improved a 1,300 or 1,200 odd bed facility, and it has 358 car parks. That's because it is workforce, they have relaxation because of that. It's hard to reconcile their firm opinion that more than half of our guests are going to be workforce, and that same relaxation shouldn't be applied to those half the rooms. On the one hand, even to the extent they want to call the whole project that and assess it that way. It's curious also that the condition that they request in terms of the new TIA, the new car park, and by the way, Scott's is the second one. You can compare with the first one. The first one was by a river engineer, which we've got a copy of too. It's hard to reconcile the two because basically, from an operational perspective, it's not that we're skimping on them, we have too many. Right? Where we have 400 for the same amount of rooms and the business much busier than this one today, there would be 25% of them vacant. What does tend to happen is heaps of these guys come in as 14-seater minibuses. They don't take 14 rooms up, but maybe the average is 5 or 6 men in a 14-seater minibus. It's not uncommon to see 80 or 100 of those in the normal operation of we, as an operator, I can tell you, certainly do not have a shortage of car parks, even with 2/3 of the amount that are suggested in this thing. There's a massive margin of error. And if we did, I would have actually sized it appropriately. Because with all due respect to Tony and the previous engineer that have been supporting reports, and even the city's engineering team, it's largely theoretical. And the last thing I'd say, there's historically been in the planning sense a difference between motels and hotels. Motels used to have must have a car park because people are travelling backwards and forwards in a car. So that was always in every scheme, every description going back as far as I can remember in history. Hotels, including ones in the CBD here, they know most of the people fly in or come in groups, etc., etc. It's really rare to try and enforce one car park to a hotel room. Because a motel, that makes sense because everyone's driving to and from in separate family groups, if that makes sense. A hotel, people are either busing in, flying in, there's just not the demand for them, and it's a waste of resources. It's not consistent with sustainable practices to spend all that time, effort, and resources creating an amenity that's just not required and not used. That doesn't make sense. Right.
Thank you.
No, follow-up. Yeah, question on that. Just looking at the RAR, my understanding, much like a number of these issues that are not fully resolved, is the RAR is saying that they would like supporting evidence. So whatever you just said to us and whatever material you've got to support that, they're asking for that. Is it reasonable to say that that's not in the TIA?
I believe it is. Yeah.
You believe it's in there? So you believe
certainly within the parking section, there's a paragraph that explains why the lower number of parking bays would still work.
So if they were to ask for a revised TIA, presumably you would refer them to when we've already mentioned it, or is there more you can say about?
To elaborate on the process that was taken for this application, we lodged a notice with the TIS from River Engineering that the city found a lot of inadequate questions with.
Yeah.
In their RFI, they asked for a list of everything they wanted to see, which was a fair enough and reasonable request. In Scott and into preparing their TIA, I think you addressed every single one of those points in that. And then after this RFI, we were unaware of any other issues. If there was to be, I think we would prefer a conditional approval requiring minor update to the TIA rather than, I don't think that's.
Just in relation to the matters that we're covering, the administration have proposed to the Commission effectively that the parking and access area should be sealed, marked and drained. It's a standard condition. I'm assuming you've got no problem with that.
No.
And there's a related proposed condition that it should be maintained for the life of development, which is also, so it's not in your proposal, but it's in this.
Yeah. That was one of the
Yep. Members, we prepared the conditions well in advance of seeing the city's conditions. We haven't had a great deal of time to review them. I guess we would say reserve our rights to review them in more detail at a later time, but at a fundamental level, based on discussions with Belinda, really condition 3E, and then the limitation on limitation on patronage and trading, we don't feel are necessary. So conditions 25 and 26, principally because we'll be required to comply with the noise regulations anyway, and we've provided adequate acoustic information to show trading through to midnight is appropriate and can be managed, and we'll have to do that in far greater detail to obtain a hotel liquor license. And then patronage will be limited by the number of toilets on site. So if I was to say reserving our rights for a further detailed review at maybe at a later time, conditions 3E and conditions 26 and 25 would be the ones that we would at this point have any.
Are you saying you're okay with condition 3A and condition?
Like I said, reserving our rights of without having had the detailed time, because we got these very late. But if I was to say on the balance of things, I don't like the idea of having to submit revised plans to all of those aspects. I think the plans are adequate in their own right. But if we need to provide some of these other things, I guess my view would be, as we've continuously tried to do, work in good faith with the city through this process. I would say we've gone to great lengths to do that. And knowing Neil, I think we would try to continue to work in good faith through some of those aspects, as long as we recognise or receive that good faith receipt of collaboration from the city.
Sorry, members, too. In terms of the trading hours, one thing I was admitted, which is very relevant to me as an operator, the city have inadvertently, in specifying those terms, the primary thing for me is that how are you going to go and eat breakfast? Read what the condition says. How does anyone have breakfast in my restaurant? They want a condition that I can't open for breakfast. That's the exact effect of that condition. So that follows on. My liquor license is until 12 p.m. The 2 acoustic reports that we had to issue to them said the sound levels were entirely appropriate to go to 12 till midnight. There's different things.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So
we've got that.
Okay.
We understand.
Yeah, the trading hours are not.
So
not well considered.
the point is that you contest the trading hours.
Yeah.
We don't need to debate it.
No, sorry.
Across the table here.
So I'm not familiar with the process. No.
But you're contesting the trading hours and the patron numbers.
Yes. Correct. 3A Wednesday. We're happy with that. The landscaping elevation.
Well, but it talks about built form enhancements.
A doesn't.
And then condition 1H talks about revised colours, materials, and finishes. It sounds like it's new buildings.
Yes.
To me, there's also talk about ramps, and
I think
that might have implications for the.
They're right anyway. I don't know. It's not that they've assessed and found them to be wrong. They're just plucking at a thing. Oh, maybe that's wrong. The building surveyor.
Right. Thank you. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it does appear that there might be some problems from your point of view.
Presiding member, can go back to a matter.
Brian, eager to say something.
Yeah. Okay. No, to do with the elevation, and as the question's been, I checked the plans, and I'm happy to be corrected. I don't see an elevation from the street.
Oh,
so there's not one?
No. There wasn't a landscaping plan. And there wasn't well, there's landscaping shown on the.
Yeah, but it's not a street elevation.
Detail, and there's not a street elevation.
Okay.
Which I thought Owen indicated there was one who's.
I think the perspectives and the elevation. Difference in opinions.
There is no elevation on the street.
I've got one more thing.
Yes, Brian.
Again, just with a view to looking at how far, what I'm keen to establish is how far is there fundamental disagreement, or how far can there be some compromise, possibly with the addition of more information, because that seems to me to be critical.
Yeah.
So going down my comparison of what the proposed conditions might be for approval and what the cities might do, I'm looking at things like financial planning and the beat, that you'll both seem to be on a similar page to that, leaving out the details, but landscaping that you're prepared to provide. Noise management plan and noise assessment. Sounds like that's something you've already put in your proposal. External lighting is both got construction environmental management plan that we've both got in operation. The other one that I can see that I'm not clear on is a staging plan. There's two conditions proposed for staging plan, and that each phase should be fully completed before the next one. Can you tell us whether that's something you could live with, or whether that's something fundamentally opposed to?
We can live with the completion of each stage prior to the next one. We want us as the assessor of what the market conditions are doing and what our practical abilities are to determine how big each stage is and when we bring it on. We don't want to be in a situation where we have to go through a similar thing that we've gone through for development. If someone who doesn't, I regard myself to be the best artist of that, right? So I want to be able to build a stage. The reason we've done that staging plan, initially we had no staging plan. I was on the impression subject obviously to practical things like electricity, stormwater, etc. The reason that was put there was because the liquor department with the licence for the gaming, they require the 15 of the plan. In other words, to have a hotel licence, you must have accommodation. In the planning world, you can have hotel accommodation and you may or may not have a hotel licence. No, a hotel licence specifically is a hotel licence, and the hotel licence requires you to have accommodation. A tavern is not required. A tavern is not required to have accommodation. So that's the difference between the two acts.
So I'm hearing that the administration's proposed condition 25, you can't do that because it limits you to putting in a staging plan that can't be changed. We'll check. I'm happy to check with the administration later, but that was my take on the intent.
It feels, yes, very flexible and it's not a condition that I'm used to. And I do feel like it does limit some of the development and we wouldn't support it. That's not to say I wouldn't accept approval about how they run it, but I do not feel that.
Sorry, if you come from, why did you put a staging plan in?
Because liquor licensing game, they request it. They said, please show us in your application that you intend to have accommodation at the same time as it. And the town, in fact,
there was a request as part of the RFI to show it before staging. And at this point, it was just significant.
And they were, and because the town had to come to us, they said you must have that. So we went restaurant, and we had some practical considerations too. But these things are going to come. These hotel rooms are going to come from the factory and get landed here at a certain rate, which is yet to be determined. But I intend. I'm not attempting to get this development for a speculation. I'm building. I'm 60 years old. I want to start it and finish it before I retire. I don't want to take another year. So our purchase order sits in the factory, and those things are going to come in fast.
Do you think you could live with a more developed staging plan?
Absolutely, but absolutely, I can. But I want to decide how and when I put my buildings on
Not
the
the
land.
one that we put in.
I mean, if you
Sorry to interrupt. I've got my little yellow hand up on Zoom, but I don't know if you can see my little yellow hand. So, which is a function. I will lower it now. My apologies. Look, I'm having a little bit of difficulty in hearing all of the conversation, but just maybe to give you usually the reason for a staging plan on a planning approval is to ensure that there's no requirement to comply with all of the conditions up front. So for example, usually there'll be a requirement that, landscaping must be undertaken prior to, or must be completed prior to occupancy of the development. Now, in circumstances where you're constructing a development in stages, it would be counterintuitive to put all of the landscaping in for the whole of the development in circumstances where you actually haven't put the buildings in yet for the staging. So it's usually they're usually indicative plans so that you can identify in agreement with the local government about which of the conditions will need to be complied with in relation to each stage, rather than having a staging plan that is so that is so rigid that it can't be moved around depending upon what needs to be done. So I don't know that it's necessary to actually have such rigid conditions in 15 and 16 and obligate that someone cannot commence a new stage without finalising the stage prior. It's really, as I said, to provide some indication about, well, when are you going to put stormwater in for that part? When are you going to, put your landscaping in? So you don't get that requirement to do all of it up front. But similarly, that developers don't get away with doing nothing until the whole thing is constructed. So, if we're being practical about it, I don't think that there is a need to have this have such a rigid approach, provided that a plan is provided. And that an agreement is reached in relation to which of the conditions will be, which component of each condition will be complied with at each stage. And that's usually done by negotiation with the Shire after the fact.
Brian, is it? I've got another one.
So, question that deals with staging.
Yes, I think I understand now your position with regards to staging. What we might normally obviously like to see is agreement in advance of this. And so we're having to sort of wade through this a little bit.
Apologies for that. We did reach out prior on a couple of occasions, or Alan did, to the city for a draft set of conditions that we could discuss and agree, and we were told they're not protected.
Are you talking about all conditions now, not staging?
That was a general question as
Yeah.
to why we're having to delve with
Yeah.
But I've got a question of Belinda whilst sort of had the thought. With regard to the definitions of use, we've heard what you've got to say about that. The administration have explained their interpretation of that. The particular point I was curious of your view is that there seems to be some differences of opinion, shall we say, about the word. I'm looking at the workforce accommodation definition, and in sub-paragraph A, it says primarily for the accommodation of workers, and the administration has interpreted that to mean percentages. So if you go over 50%, then it's one or the other. Could you just give your interpretation of that for us so we can better understand your approach to that?
Yes, look, as I said, it's. I think if you took a literal meaning to that, I suspect that most hotels in the Pilbara would tip into that paragraph A of the workforce accommodation as well. I mean, there are certain times of the year when the Pilbara is not a preferred location for tourism or other travel, and most of the people who are staying in these hotels are there for some type of work. And given that the predominant type of work in this region is, pastoral or, resource industries and construction, it's likely that that hotels are also filled with those sorts of workers. Look, it is a vexed question. When I go to, I sit as a member on the Midwest Port Authority, and I go to Geraldton once a month for a night for a board meeting. And when I'm on port, I wear high vis as well. So am I covered by one of these industries when I'm staying in a hotel for that purpose? And if you took it, as I was saying, if you took it to that very literal conclusion, then that probably is the case. As I said, I think that you can't look at workforce accommodation, that definition, I don't think you can look at sublim A without looking at sublim B, because it's there's an and in between. And when you look at the characterisation of the use in sublim B, it's for associated catering, sporting recreational facilities for the occupants note that they use the word occupants rather than patrons as well. I think that's the language is important there, and authorised visitors. So there's the implication in that is that it's a closed camp, and that only people who are invited in by the people who are running the organisation will be allowed there, and therefore I think that the word that word primarily is almost a bit of a red herring in paragraph A. I think also, I mean, it says other industries as well. I mean, what might that cover if you took a very literal view? It means any type of industry. It could be government, for example, or so for those reasons, I think the fact alone that people working in these industries might stay in a hotel doesn't make it a workforce accommodation camp, even in circumstances where on any one night there might be more workers there than there are tourists or people visiting their mum or being there for a hospital visit or whatever.
Yes, I had a question about bushfire safety. The conditions around that. Just in reviewing the report, obviously there's one access into the site and out of the site, correct?
No.
No? Sorry.
Sorry, correct. On the show.
On the plan shown, yes, but we're since identified as second.
Right. So, just I asked a question earlier about whether there's one access, two access. It's actually two proposed.
So we have shown our future intended development, which is on Crown Land. That's subject to Crown Land inquiries. We have our bushfire consultant Nathan online, and Daniel Panicky in the room as a new review. In preparing and reading the RAR, we did identify there is a public road reserve as one of the portions in the verge. So you would have saw my plan with the red line. And in this road reserve, there is a portion of road reserve that we can legally use for secondary access.
And that's what the proposition is, and that's
Yes.
emergency access.
At this point, we would have two.
Would you like the bushfire?
It's
Bushfire consultant?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Nathan, to respond to that issue.
Yeah, so currently there is only one access through shown on the plans because there's one set of frontage, which is approximately 20 metres wide. The requirement as part of the guidelines states that there should be more than one if possible. As it stands at the moment, as is actually only one access way through to the road at the moment, there is only one access through to the road, the 20-metre wide frontage. So the secondary access as it stands at the moment from my point of view when I did my report was that there was only one access possible. Because of the way that the structure of the land is on the road access, I felt that it was not an undue risk just to have one access and that it would allow suitable egress for emergency in an emergency and also access for emergency vehicles to come in the site.
I'm correct, it was mentioned that being mostly being grass fire and the urgency is not as substantial, significant as a forest, for example.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And there's also a very large perimeter road around the whole site, so giving very wide access or a very wide buffer, approximately 30 metres, I believe, from the buildings to the vegetation. There's also, it's from the aerial, there's also informal tracks going around the site. So it was my view that emergency vehicles, when they were going to fight the grass or scrub fire, wouldn't actually access the site to do that. They would more likely go around the outside of the site than come into the site. So that would reduce the amount of traffic in and out of the site in the case of a bushfire.
Any more questions? Yep. Well, just before we leave, I'll just check my notes. Well, I've got one question, but I just want to make sure I don't have any others. Well, I guess my fundamental question is we have recommendations in the responsible authority report to defer the application for to be considered alternatively as workforce accommodation. If the panel was to adopt that recommendation, would you be pursuing this application?
Short answer, no. We have no more.
Well, I'm addressing it to you.
Yep. Absolutely. So we have no more information to add in support of a workforce camp. Even if they approve one, well, we've got nothing else to add. And even if they did approve it, we don't want to build a workforce.
Well, that's my question.
It's just not going to happen.
Can I add to that? The most recent approval went through DAP for the Rangers on DeWitt Road, was a workforce camp. The conditions applied to that, it was Form 2, but the conditions reapplied to that approval, we've discussed those, limited the time frame of approval, 10 years. We won't build that. It also limited the patrons quite heavily. Having regard to the most recent approval for workforce accommodation and conditions put on that one, we would not pursue this application.
So the answer is
no. Absolutely not.
Okay, we'll now move to the administration. And we'll have okay, we've got Chris Sayer online.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. We can. Chris.
Sorry, Jaron Hurley's here as well. I didn't introduce myself at the start of the meeting because we were having some technical issues, but we seem to have sorted them out. So I'm here as well.
Who else do you have?
Jaron Hurley, the Manager of Planning Services at the City of Karratha.
Now, there's been a lot discussed, but and we have your extensive report, and we provided with an alternative recommendation, which we thank you for. And just to mention that that doesn't suggest any preconceived idea of the proposal. It's a standard, certainly of me, it's a standard request, because if we get to the situation where we go counter to a refusal or an alternative or a recommendation such as you have, we don't have the administration running around trying to put conditions together at the meeting itself. So that's solely the point of that R13 request. So I'll ask if there's any, and we have your, as I say, we have your report, and your, particularly in relation to the interpretation of the use and so forth. So we don't need to, I don't think we need to hear from that again. So you're happy to go straight to questions, or is there any burning issue that you would want to raise before we see if there's any questions from the panel?
Look, I did prepare something to try and, I suppose, be efficient with the city's time, and bearing in mind, and I think it's been raised, there's been a lot of toing and froing leading up to this actual meeting. So I'll just quickly run through that if you like, and then any questions that you have, feel free to ask. So firstly, the city is a pro-development local government and prides itself on being able to contribute to good development solutions for proponents, the state and the local community. The city's wanting to find a way to approve the redevelopment of this site and is still open to finding the best development outcome. The formal DAP process is time critical. The city accepts why that is the case and always makes its best efforts to present the DAP panel with what is considered and preferably agreed as a good development outcome. In this case, the applicant and the city still have different views on how this proposed development should be classified. However, the city is still seeking to find a development outcome that is acceptable for both parties.
Sorry, if I can just, what we've heard, that's the alternative is not acceptable to the applicant. They wouldn't wish to proceed with the alternative form of accommodation. So I don't know whether we need to pursue that point any further.
Right. Do you want me to, I mean, I don't have much more to say. Do you want me to continue or do you want me to stop?
Sorry, just in relation to that matter. Yes. We've heard your arguments and the applicant has, or the proponent, the person who's proposed, but has indicated that they don't wish to pursue the alternative, an alternative form of accommodation, if you like.
Yeah, so I suppose I'm just presenting where the city's currently at, based on all of the information that's been submitted since the responsible authority report was submitted, which is not going down that line as such.
You know, I understand that. So sorry, please carry on.
Okay, sorry. I hope this doesn't take too long. The applicant wants the whole development to be approved as permanent hotel. The city has three main concerns with the proposed development being approved as a hotel. Number one, the sheer number of rooms proposed as hotel rooms. Number two, the layout. And number three, the design. Firstly, in terms of the scale of the proposed development, despite what the proponent may have had approved elsewhere some time ago, the city does not consider it acceptable here and now to approve 830 rooms under the use classification of hotel based on the information submitted. The city does not have a problem with a bar and restaurant that is open to the public and recognises that to be considered a hotel under the definition in the planning regulations, which we accept is model rather than deemed, the proposed development needs to have rooms attached. However, at the scale proposed, this development would be one of the largest workforce accommodation developments in the city. And we have some very big workforce accommodation villages. So in relation to scale, the city's position is that it is open to considering a hybrid proposal that incorporates some workforce accommodation and some hotel rooms. But there are flow-on layout and design considerations that would need to be reviewed in detail. So obviously we can talk about layout and design. The city's got some comments on that, but I'll just sort of...
Are these additional to the matters you raised in your RAR?
Well, I suppose we've reviewed the submissions that have been submitted by the applicant, and there was a number of them. So look, we're always looking to sort of find something that we think can work. So the city has already stated it's prepared to accept lower design standards for workforce accommodation on the basis that only a temporary approval would be granted for that use. So in relation to layout and design, the city's position is that it would be prepared to consider the hotel use classification applying to some of the rooms, but that some of the rooms should be classified as workforce accommodation. Did I say, sorry, the city would be prepared to consider the hotel use classification applying to some of the rooms, but that some of the rooms should be classified as workforce accommodation. The layout and design should clearly distinguish those different components of the development. Because the parties have been focusing on a one or the other argument to this point, the city has not had time to discuss this hybrid option with the applicant. But if the DAP considers this to be a reasonable solution, then the city would be happy to work on an approval that better, sorry, I've just skipped to the wrong point in my notes. That better defines what that looks like. So in summary, the city would like to find a good outcome for the proponent. The city does not consider it acceptable to approve the number of rooms proposed as hotel rooms, but would be open to considering more of a hybrid proposal. Regardless of the DAP's position on land use classification, the city considers that there are layout and particularly design considerations that need to be reviewed in detail before approval is granted. And finally, the city would be happy to work with the applicant on making any required revisions as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So panel members, questions? Yeah, Brian.
Okay, I hear what you say. What I'm curious about is what kind of head of power policy are you using for your interpretation of what you're seeking? So just to sort of elaborate on that, it sounds like you're trying to design something the applicants are not proposing. That's what it sounds like to me. So if you've got a problem with the scale, are you referring to a policy or provision and scheme that enables you to suggest what is an appropriate level of accommodation? That's the first thing. The second part with the layout is, again, for a hotel, do you have a policy or requirements and guidance as to how a hotel should be designed? That's the second point. And the third point is, with regard to a standard of design, do you have a policy or guidance that says what the suitable design standard is required for a hotel?
So in answer to the first question about the head of power, look, we're just referring to the legislation, the scheme, the policies that are referred to both in the responsible authority report and in the and I suppose in the applicant's submissions and what we've heard today. But I mean, there is, and we've included some cases that have gone to SAT. So some of these matters you don't find the exact answer in looking through all of that statutory planning framework, and you do need to, I suppose, consider the context within which those things are framed. So that's the first point. On the second 2 points, the answer is no. We don't have policies that set out what a hotel should look like, or the considerations that should apply beyond what is in the legislation and what is in the scheme. So and look, the definitions are well, they're not giving an explicit answer through looking at just the definitions alone. Was there anything else there?
Sorry, the policy framework that we look at for design is State Planning Policy 7.0 design. Like as Jeremy said, we don't have a specific local planning policy for hotel development and how a hotel should look, but state planning policy, and I think a lot of regional local governments wouldn't have that. And state planning policy 7.0 is there to provide general design, elements to ensure that design of developments across the state are appropriate standard and provide decent visual amenity to the public domain and to residential areas.
Yes, just a follow-up to that. And I do understand that you're referring, I guess, to the state's planning kind of guidance and requirements. With regard to, we talked a bit about the presentation to the street and so on. One of the considerations in the deemed provisions is that there's a need, in my mind, to be clear on what the existing and desired future character of that locality should be. So we've got some kind of benchmark as to whether or not this proposal is of an acceptable presentation. Can you tell me if you have anything? It looks to me like it's a residential area, but is there anything in your planning framework that suggests what the desired future character of that area should look like?
Again, we'd be looking at SPP 7.0 for the 10 design elements there and providing a character that's commensurate or in line with the residential area that's nearby. Obviously not look like the residential area, but provide something rather than, at the moment, we're faced with a service area that's open to the streetscape and 3 existing buildings on that site with no upgrading to them that are presented very poorly to the street.
It would be beneficial. I think earlier on in the piece there were some questions about elevations, and it is something that is of interest. Driving along Bayview Road, which is one of the main roads in Karratha, like a district distributor road, you do get a full view of this development, which to this point has been caravan park. It is an opportunity to do something more with the site, and we do hope that we can find a way, but we don't really have a lot of information to make a judgment call on comparing what's existing with what's proposed.
Any further questions?
Thank you, presiding member. I did ask the applicant about car parking and the response around car parking, and they provided a response about justifying a reduction. I'd like perhaps the officers to expand on why they believe the current proposition is not acceptable.
On the car parking, I guess we've just stated in the RAR the facts of what's required under the scheme. We have said that we think the justification that was provided was based on providing for temporary workers. There wasn't the justification that has come in through the submissions provides a lot more information, and this is the case not just with parking. A lot of the matters, technical matters that are addressed, there's information that has come in now that was not we asked for this information through the request for further information, and now more information has come in the last 48 hours addressing, providing more detail on things like parking. So we're not averse to the reciprocal argument and reducing numbers. We're happy to reduce numbers where it's properly justified. We've only received this information very recently. We probably haven't had time to fully assess all of the information because there's been a lot of technical information come back. So look, we're open to some justifications for lowering the numbers, the parking numbers that the scheme requires.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions of the administration? No? Okay.
No, I only had one just in regards to earlier on the applicant mentioned that Baby Road is a low traffic road, but the Jerem's now addressed that in that it's a main distributor road.
Sorry, you broke up a bit there. Say that again.
Sorry, I'll just speak up. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. The voice is breaking up a little bit.
Sorry, recovering from the flu, so maybe I'm a bit croaky. I had one of the presenters previously mentioned that Baby Road is a low traffic road, but Jerem has now addressed that by just mentioning that it's a just main distributor road within Karratha.
Is that a question or just okay?
More of a statement.
Thank you. Just yep.
Sorry. Just a question to the administration's planners. We've been provided by the applicants an alternative recommendation for approval. Have you seen that and had the opportunity to go through that?
We have read through it. We haven't had a lot of time to do that with all the other information that was submitted, but yes, we have seen, I think it was a submission from Mr. Hightower. I think that provided some conditions should the application be approved.
Do you have any comments to make on whether the degree to which you would be acceptable, it would be acceptable to you, or?
Yeah, look, can I just, I suppose we have been requested to provide a draft set of conditions by the Development Assessment Panel, and typically the local government would provide a set of conditions for an approval, which would be the starting point for considering those conditions. The conditions are similar, but like Chris said, there's a lot to get through here, and within the conditions themselves, there's quite a bit to consider, just to make sure that that we're sort of dealing with something that can be put in place. So yeah, we have had a quick look through things, but in setting conditions, and I'm sure for the applicants as well, we just want to make sure that things are done right in stamping plans and issuing decisions.
But to clarify, we haven't recommended approval or any conditions. We've responded to the Regulation 13 request. We're still of the opinion that it's workforce accommodation.
I made that point.
Yes.
It's understood.
If I could follow up on that. So, and I totally understand the time pressures that the system puts you under. So, having said that, my reading of your proposed alternative recommendation, should it be approved as a hotel, effectively is that you pretty much said whatever's been submitted, you would like it revised, and research it. And then you've got very extensive notes in the advice notes as to what exactly you're requiring in those revisions. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, to provide guidance to the condition.
But would you accept that a lot of what's in the advice notes is directive? It's directive. And I'm assuming it's based on your disagreement that this is a hotel.
So we're being objective in our assessment, and we fully respect that the Development Assessment Panel makes the decision on this matter. Look, I think it's just from both perspectives, we're putting together conditions as requested. You know, we're not completely sure where this is going. Like Chris said, the Development Assessment Panel has our set of draft conditions because the Development Assessment Panel has requested them.
But a lot of the information in the advice notes is because we feel like we don't have the adequate information. Now with the written submissions, there is some more information. Whether that's adequate, it needs to be properly assessed. We've got some information around bushfire, we've got some information on stormwater. In our normal process of assessing internally, we would forward that through to our relevant expertise in the internal departments, or we might go to DFIS and seek some advice. We haven't had time to do that. So when we wrote the advice notes, they're quite informative because we felt there was a lack of information, and that's where we were pointing to. And as I said, there is more information has come through the written submissions.
So again, just to help my understanding. So what I'm hearing you say is that you provided the best you can, and given that there was material sent to you, which you have not had the opportunity to fully assess. So I'm assuming these comments, particularly in the advice notes, relate to the level of information you previously had rather than what you currently have.
Yeah, those advice notes were, the Regulation 13 request was asked for before the written submissions came in.
Thank you.
That members, can I just make just a general comment about where the conditions got to? And I just want to say, firstly, thanks to Jerem for doing this. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I won't. Okay.
Some time, unless a member's got particular questions, then I'm afraid you can't add to.
No worries. Sorry, presiding.
Thank you. Tony, other questions? Yeah, I just had one. It's further to Brian's Curtis's initial queries. The alternative recommendation to refuse the application that's in the responsible authority report refers in all cases to there are 7 reasons for refusal, if I'm correct, and they all refer to the deemed provisions in clause 67 of the regulations. There's no reference to the your own town planning scheme or any planning policies. Was that intentional, or is as we discussed, there aren't any specific provisions?
Look, it was that they were the matters in the planning framework to consider against the development application, and they're the matters that we found we couldn't support, or we couldn't support. Sometimes through lack of information, sometimes obviously through poor design.
Is there a problem that there's reference to for the relevant parts of the legislation. I mean, we're dealing now with a framework where a lot of the provisions of the scheme are really set out in state legislation.
Well, I suppose the question is that if someone wants to develop a hotel or anything, I suppose the first point they would go to would be the local authorities' own planning instruments, and to go to the clause 67 of the planning regulations wouldn't give them much guidance as to how much what they need to do to get an approval. But I'm sorry, that's probably not a question, but it's in response to it's the reasoning behind my question, I suppose. So I just want to clarify that. Sorry, that wasn't a question. So I don't know if there are any further questions of anyone. So if sorry, I'll just refer to my notes. The only other question I had was just to clarify, unfortunately the Department of Planning wouldn't fly me to Karratha to do a site inspection, but I gather that Bayview Road doesn't have frontage. The development on, or the development to the west of the subject site, but this is the north. Oh, sorry. Well, I'll put it this way: the development on the other side of Bayview Road that addresses the tends to address the internal cul-de-sacs, not Bayview Road. Is that correct?
That is correct. Obviously, those houses, they pretty much front out looking over Nickel Bay. So a lot of houses along that frontage, while they don't have direct frontage to the road for traffic management reasons, they do take advantage of their outdoor areas and windows looking out over the bay.
But they do address the street.
No, they don't address. But they, as you described, they're cul-de-sacs with the back of their properties facing towards Bayview Road.
That's in relation to the character of the area, that question. Okay, so if there's no further questions, we'll move to the item. If I can find it, it's on my paper. Here it is. So, yes, we have, just to remind everyone, this is for lot 2654, number 275 Bayview Road, Nickel. So how you say it, Nickel? Proposed hotel and restaurant. We have a responsible authority report with a recommendation to defer the application. And the reason is that the specific use class of this proposal is workforce accommodation, not hotel, etc., etc. So that is the motion on the table that we need to consider. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that motion? No?
Yes, I'm happy to move that. Councillor McNaught.
Okay. That's Councillor McNaught. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
I'm happy to second the motion.
Okay. Now, I'll just mention that this is in normal in other circumstances, this would be a procedural motion and there would be no debate. However, as it is in the responsible authority report, it's the recommendation that it's before the panel. So there is the opportunity for all panel members to talk to the item. So firstly, I'll go to Councillor McNaught as the mover of the motion.
Yeah, thank you. And first, I'd like to thank everyone for your presentations. very informative. Tough decision to make. We're most definitely a pro-development council, as Jeremy mentioned previously, and we desperately need investment in accommodation. There's no doubt about it. But the vision of the city of Karratha is to be the most livable city in regional Australia, and part of that is quality built form design outcomes. When we look at the proposal, it very much looks like workforce accommodation, and I need to take these definitions literally. So for me, it is about primarily accommodating workers. That's also supported, or that view is also supported by the 112 minibuses, and obviously the percentage of accommodation that could potentially support. As mentioned, RAR, the dining facilities, number of rooms, etc., make me believe that this is primarily workforce accommodation. I was very pleased to hear, though, from the City of Karratha officers that there's the potential for a hybrid, and I would hope that the proponent would be willing to explore that with the city.
Thank you. Councillor Nunn, that's the seconder.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor McNaught's comments. I think this proposal, whilst we definitely need the accommodation, it certainly looks and the data seems to support a workforce accommodation, and I believe it should be assessed as such.
Thank you. Anyone wants to speak against the motion? Tony?
Presiding member, I'm happy to speak. I can understand the RAR recommendation to defer, but we often look at classifications in the scheme, and the very clear direction from SAT and the courts is that interpretation should be a simple interpretation. And under the scheme, there is an interpretation for hotel, and in my view, the development fits within that quite neatly. I do accept the proposition that it may be not typical of what we might get, particularly in the southern part of WA, but that in itself is not a reason for not accepting that it's not a hotel. So I'm not prepared to defer the application on that basis.
Yeah, really iterating the last comment. I've looked really carefully at all the material provided, and in my view, this is capable of approval as a hotel, and therefore I would be unable to accept a deferral on the basis that it was deemed to be workforce accommodation. To me, there's also some quite literal elements in that the applicant is not proposing workforce accommodation. It sounds like it might look like it, and that's a completely different question. But they are very clearly not proposing that. This is a facility that will be open to anyone to come and visit. And I'm also very aligned with the proposition that in an area like Karratha, a high proportion of visitors may well be of a business nature, and therefore, trying to somehow impose control and limits on how many of those might be, and whether they ought to be only in workforce accommodation, seems to me a very spurious argument. So I'm not supportive of deferring for those reasons.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also opposed to the motion. Firstly, as Mr. Curtis said, the applicant has applied for a hotel, and quite clearly under the town planning scheme, a hotel is something that can be considered, and that's what we are bound to do. We have to consider whether the hotel is acceptable in terms of the town planning scheme, first and foremost, and any other town planning instruments that might apply. I've got to say, unless there are specific provisions in the scheme, and we have seen them for workforce accommodation, but generally whether the application is in Margaret River or whether it's in Karratha is really not relevant. What is relevant is the town planning instruments that we need to assess this application against. I certainly don't, I've never seen having said all that, I do appreciate what the city is trying to do, but I do have doubts about the validity of such a recommendation that says, well, no, we don't support this, but if you make an application for something else, we might consider it. I don't know how that would stand as a decision of this panel. So, yeah, whatever we do with this application, it's my firm view we have to deal with it as a hotel and decide whether that can be supported or not. So with that, I'll move back to the mover of the motion to close the vote. You're on mute, Davis.
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting the mouse to work. I appreciate where you're coming from, and obviously respect what the panel has to say. I suppose as a City of Karratha local, I do have concerns in regards to the precedent this may set in regards to having a permanent hotel with the characteristics and appearance of workforce accommodation. But I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So I'll put that motion to approve the recommendation to defer the application. All those in favour? Tony, you put your hand up? I presume, yeah, thank you. Against? That's lost. 3-2. You get that? Mover and second supported it. So we need a alternative motion. So I'll ask the panel if anyone has an alternative motion that they wish to move. We need an alternative. We can't leave. We can't leave until we have a motion to consider. Silence. Well,
someone has to move something.
yes, yeah, I know. Well,
you can move the refusal or the approval and discuss if you want to make changes.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, we can move it either approval or refusal, or for that matter, a deferral.
Yeah. Presiding member, I am, even though I think the information we've been presented is somewhat difficult to completely assess in a meeting like this, I'm comfortable that the applicant's alternative.
You're moving it.
I am going to move that.
Can you tell us what you're moving? So then
okay. In which case,
you need to move before
I will move the applicant's alternative recommendation and
to approve
the application.
And are you coming to suggest there might be some?
There may be.
Yeah, okay. So we have.
Would you like me to share it on the screen?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. So just to be clear, we have an alternative motion to approve the application as per the alternative provided by the applicants. So that was an approval with a number of conditions. With
Madison, it's
14 conditions and advice notes.
Yep.
So that's the motion before us now. We've still got the councillors up the top there, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? That's seconded Brian Curtis, thank you. So, Mr. Arias, as the mover of the motion, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. As I started to say, it's probably not a preferable position to be for the panel to have to come to a conclusion on quite a detailed matter like conditions in the meeting forum. Having said that, in terms of the primary consideration and whether this is a hotel or not, I'm satisfied that the interpretation of the scheme or the classification provides clear scope for this panel to determine it as a hotel as has been applied. In terms of the number of details, my view is that the reports provided by the applicant satisfactorily address the normal planning considerations like noise, traffic, car parking, which I'll address separately. So I'm satisfied with that. In terms of the planning framework, it is a bit unusual. It is on its own, so it clearly is compatible with the tourist zone. The overall planning framework doesn't, in my mind, present a problem. The residential land on the opposite side clearly has a focus to the west, if that's correct orientation, and away from this side. There's also a historical element to this, which I think addresses some of the amenity impact issues. So from that perspective, those matters are satisfactorily addressed. The issue of car parking was something that I had some difficulty with, but following the responses, my view is that it's appropriate to provide variation. The reason for that is clearly there is business and workers in the area, they're going to utilise it, and as part of that, they will use bus facilities, and I don't see that incompatible with the hotel use. And hotels around the world provide sort of bus getting you in and out. I also accept that there will be a high reciprocal use of the car parking between the restaurant, the bar, and the hotel. And in particular, in this location, I think there's common sense that that will be the case. I also accept the argument that Karratha is different to Perth in that, given there is probably a much higher likelihood of vehicles being shared for the accommodation usage. So on that basis, I am prepared to move the alternative recommendation put forward by the applicant.
Thank you. Brian.
As I mentioned before, I've looked really carefully at this, and I believe that the proposal is clearly fits within a hotel classification. It's acceptable in a tourist zone, and there's a quite clear need for this kind of development. So I don't have any real problem with accepting that this is something that is suitable in this location. It's formerly a caravan park. So in my mind, it is still providing, not just for people, visitors, but it's an upgrade on what's there already. The location has historically presented as a caravan park. I find it very difficult to understand the notion that because it's a new development, there's a standard of development required for a hotel that I can't see where the justification is. I'm also noting that, and I do understand the city's position, but because this is being assessed primarily against the state planning framework, the difficulty I have with that is that I know Karratha quite well, and it is distinctly different to many other parts of the state. And therefore, the provisions that are in, for example, SPP 7, are very generic, and they don't offer easy interpretation in the context of Karratha. I believe that the administration's intentions are clearly that they'd like to see a good outcome here. But my sense is that they've been swayed by the appearance rather than the acceptance that a hotel operator, on the face of it, can quite clearly look at what they deem to be the market demand that they're providing for, and understand what those people are requiring in terms of facilities. I think that's a matter for the operator. I don't agree with the suggestion that an alternative is to have partial worker accommodation. Don't understand or why that. So I'm supportive of this. I also find it challenging to reconcile the two proposed recommendations for approval, but I'm not supportive of the city's one, because I believe it. Well, they've acknowledged that it doesn't take into account the information that has now been provided, so it's out of date in that sense, and it seems very, very prescriptive to me, rather than being open to having more information provided and then assessing that and its merits. Having said that, I do believe that the alternate recommendation by the proponents is a little lightweight in terms of all the matters that might be covered, and I would like to see a minor amendment to what is being proposed, and that's to accommodate something that is covered in the city's alternative recommendation, and that is with regard to all parking, vehicle access and manoeuvring areas are to be sealed, line marked, curb and drained. So there's a proposed condition 14 in the city's alternative recommendation for approval. The wording related to staging, I don't believe that's appropriate, but it could be amended to simply all parking, vehicle access and manoeuvring areas, sealed, line marked, curb, drain.
So can you give us a number, please?
Yeah, it's 14 in the city's alternative approval under general conditions. Oh, sorry, prior to the council use permission. So I'm suggesting the deletion of the first line up to all. So this first sentence starts all parking vehicle, and then the rest as written. Just to me, because that's a standard condition, I don't see it covered elsewhere, and it's appropriate to have that, so I propose that. as an amendment.
Can I take that as a foreshadowed amendment?
That's exactly what.
Okay, that's right. We'll hear from other speakers. Anyone wish to speak against the recommendation to approve the application? No? You're on mute. Kelly? Yes.
I would like to speak against the motion. Mr. Hightower and our City of Karratha Planning Department have both mentioned today that they haven't had time to fully assess each set of conditions. I'm concerned that if we go ahead, we are, I guess, creating a situation where conditions are being adopted that may not be suitable for both parties. So I'm just concerned that that is rushing the matter.
I'd concur with, Councillor. I concur with Councillor Nunn. If we could have the extra time to ensure that we've got the appropriate conditions, if that's possible. I've also have concerns in regards to the parking requirement, and I say partially in jest that Mr. Hightower's anecdote in regards to the Premier conveniently forgot his security detail, because there was at least a couple of 300 series Land Cruisers following the Premier at the time.
Okay, thank you. Look, I'm going to speak in support of the application. Well, as the motion to approve the application is put forward. Firstly, as I said, it's clear that we can deal with, the applicant has applied for a hotel, and we can deal with that under the town planning scheme. There's no question there. The legal references that were provided in the RAR, one related to the alternative prohibited use, and the other related to an unlisted use. So this is different in that respect, insofar that the hotel is hotels are discretionary use, and restaurants are permitted use. So it's very clear that the scheme deals with that, and it's then a matter to consider whether the application meets the requirements for a hotel. And I haven't really seen anything that says that it doesn't satisfy the requirements in one way or another. Yes, it may not be the quality that maybe was hoped by the city, but there's really nothing to support that, short of a design review, and that's an important input, but it's not sufficient for an independent design review, I believe, to sustain a refusal of development. It would normally, it might improve a development, but to rely solely on that, I think would be somewhat dangerous. Another thing that occurred to me is this is like a high rise that's been flattened, and I understand the reasons for that. And one of the things that I think occurred to me, that if this was in the city centre of Karratha, it would be a different matter. But it's on the periphery of the city, and I think the expectations of what you get would be different. And but aside from that, as I say, I can't find any major breaches of the planning framework that would sustain a refusal of the application. I think, and landscaping has been mentioned, that's a condition of approval, and I think that is crucial to this development. And as I say, we didn't have the benefit of a streetscape presentation. And I think, again, that's important. It's interesting, there's been talk about hiding the building, but I imagine you don't want it to be a complete secret that, that it won't want to hide it all together, but it is important that it provides a presentable, attractive frontage to the entrance, one of the entrances to the town. That is important. It's a combination, I think, of the built form and the and the landscaping. Interesting, having just come from a very famous tourist town that I visited, a number, which is pretty much all resorts. There's no mining industry supporting that, but a lot of those resorts do have a lot of blank fencing. They tend to be, but the main road in tends to be a lot of blank fencing. I'm not suggesting that's a good thing, but it's just one thing that struck me, that they don't always present. They're more internally focused than externally focused. But I think in this case, I think there's room to improve there. And I would perhaps like to add something to the condition relating to landscaping. I think the other thing is it is a large site cover. It's an intensive development, albeit only single story. Like I say, it's been flattened out. But I think with the landscaping, it's important that there's some deep zone, substantial trees put in, and I don't know whether that's mentioned in the. I don't think it's mentioned in the draft condition, but I would like to propose an amendment to that condition 5 that well, firstly talks about, I'm trying to think of words, the project should be for a detailed landscape as well as submitted, and perhaps we can add a HI to that says that and that detailed consideration be given to the presentation of the development to the street, or an attractive presentation to the development to the street, and also that when it says location, species, size of existing vegetation be removed, exact species, maturity, location, and number of proposed plants, and perhaps add there to include deep zone trees. So there you say. We'll get the exact wording, but you know what I mean. So in other words, substantial trees, because I think it does need certainly some substantial planting around it where you can. So I'll and bear in mind, Mr. Curtis has got a foreshadowed one as well, but I'll put that amendment. I'll move that. So it's in relation to this under condition 5, the presentation.
Did you want to get some wording from the city, or do you have wording for it?
Well, I think that no. Well, were you writing down some words?
I got the wording for I, but just in regards to the trees, do you have some definite wording for that?
Yeah,
one?
under C.
Yeah.
5C. That to include deep zone planting for substantial trees. Can you just tell me what I said about the streetscape?
Detailed consideration be given to presentation to the streetscape.
Yes.
Streetscape.
Presentation to the street.
To the street.
Yeah, of the presentation of the development to the street.
Presentation of the development.
So I'll propose that amendment. Do I have a second for that? Second is Brian Curtis. I think I've spoken enough to it. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion or speak against the motion? Okay, I'll declare that carried.
Ready to vote? Is everyone going to vote?
Well, no one's speaking against it, so. All right, well.
Yes, they're going to do
Okay,
vote.
all right. All those in favour? Against? Okay, sorry. Councillor out.
Sorry.
There's one comment I was going to make. Look, and as I say, thank you. I appreciate that at late notice, and this often happens, that the city was asked to provide a alternative recommendation, and I understand what they were trying to do, but I think if we were to adopt that would in effect be refusing the application to the extent of changes to the proposal would in effect be a complete redesign, which again I don't think would be sustainable. So with that, I'll go back to that shadow amendment.
I just want to clarify the words because I may have given you the wrong statement. Prior to the commencement of the use, all parking vehicle access. So it's the city's condition 14 with the removal of each stage of development.
Yeah. So is that a new condition?
Yeah, it would be a one on the end.
So I'll add it to the end. So we don't
at the very end. Yeah. So that'll be new
15.
condition.
Yeah. So I'll second that motion. You speaking to it on it?
I mean that it's a standard condition that should reasonably be on this time.
Yeah. No, I've got nothing further to say. So any other panel members wish to speak to that? So I'll put that amendment. All those in favour? 3 against? 2. Thank you. That's carried 3-2. So with that, I will go back to the mover of the motion to close debate.
Thank you, presiding member. There's been a lot of discussion. It's been a long meeting. I don't propose to prolong too much more, but I think there's some crucial things that I'd like to reiterate. I can appreciate the proposition put forward by the responsible authority officers to effectively make it a better proposal. Well, it's not for the decision maker to do that. There are significant limitations, and both SAT and the courts have determined that we as a decision maker can change landscaping, we can address some elements of the development, but it's not our job to make it a proposal. So I think that's a key element. In terms of consideration of conditions, it is not ideal to perhaps determine the conditions in the manner we have. Having said that, we have had conditions proposed by the responsible authority officers and by the applicant, which are very similar. So from that perspective, and based on similar proposals that I've been involved in, I think we've got a comprehensive range of conditions. So from that perspective, I'm satisfied that the conditions are appropriate and relevant. And the final comment is that, which was a fundamental issue around whether this is a hotel or not. I indicated earlier my interpretation. It's very clear that it is. I probably should have referred to Ms. Morich's assessment as a practitioner, a legal practitioner in this area, and she quite clearly confirmed in her opinion that's the case. So, presiding member, based on that, I'm happy to close debate and move to the recommendation.
Thank you. Well, I'll move that recommendation to approve the application subject to a number of conditions and a couple of amendments. All those in favour? 3 against? It's 2. That's carried. Other business? I have to ask if there is any general business. I'm still not sure why that's on the agenda, but it is. So I will ask if there's any general business. No general business? Okay, thank you. That concludes the meeting at 4:07. Thank you very much for everyone for your attendance and for your contribution. A very challenging item to deal with.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks very much.